Hello and welcome into another episode of Preps to Pros. I'm Cooper Petagna alongside Andrew Ivins, and we got a great show for you today. We're going to talk a little bit about the juice. Andrew Ivins talking about maybe some noise going down in South Florida. Carnell, Tate, Brandon Ennis, Mark Fletcher, a couple Ohio State commits, maybe looking around a little bit, and we got some big-time programs sniffing around them as well. We're going to get to the weekend recap of some of the top performances across the nation as well. We're going to talk about Oklahoma and Brent Venables' hot start, and then we're going to get into the 2-minute drill. But Drew, I'm going to start out with a little bit of a controversial take, and that is, my friend, you were the hardest working man in the recruiting industry, getting out to 5 games this weekend. You were a busy man. How you doing, my brother?
Well, I'm sunburnt. It was kind of hot being out there in the Florida sun for all those games, but it was an awesome event. The Broward County National Showcase. First year they're doing it. Sounds like next year it's going to be bigger and better. 8 Broward County teams facing 8 out-of-state teams. I heard Texas might send a school next year. So it was fun, part of the job. A little difficult coming off the freaks list. I needed to get some sleep last night. I think I slept 10 hours, but I'm ready to rock, man. Week 1. Few days away when it comes to college football, and of course high school football doesn't stop. You
sound a little tired, so I think I have the right thing for you. That's a little bit of juice, and Drew, you texted me. You said it was going to be a big Monday in terms of the news cycle and recruiting. We didn't have anything really to talk about on Wednesday, but this Monday you want to kick it off. We're going to talk about top 247 receiver and one of the best receivers in the country. That is Carnell Tate. And you told me that Tennessee is not done kicking the tires on the Ohio State commit.
Well, there's been some rumors over the past few weeks and really, throughout the recruiting process that Carnell Tate likes Tennessee. The Volunteers sent him an official scholarship offer. A lot of schools did as well. But talking with some different people familiar with that recruitment, I think the Tennessee stuff has some footing. Now, does that mean Carnell's wavering on his pledge to the Ohio State Buckeyes? No. I saw him on Saturday, asked him if he's going to take any visits, and he said, nothing's set up, nothing's planned. I'm focused on my senior season at IMG Academy. But I do think there are some people inside his camp that are somewhat not intrigued by the Volunteers, but like the Volunteers and like what Tennessee brings to the table. So I think if there's one school that has a chance at potentially flipping Carnell Tate from Ohio State, it's Tennessee. And that's a place he's visited a bunch. He's familiar with Nico Iamaleava. So Tennessee, definitely think there is some footing there with the Volunteers and Carnell Tate. Does that mean he visits? I don't know, but I know that they have been in contact, and obviously Tennessee is doing an excellent job on the recruiting trail here in the class of 2023.
Not too much of a surprise when this came down to the decision the first time. Carnell Tate, as we go back and kind of look at it from 30,000 feet, was torn between Tennessee and Ohio State. Tennessee sitting now with the number 11 class in the 24/7 Sports Composite Team rankings. They're doing a heck of a job. You talked about Nico Iamaleava, certainly enticing, one of the best players in the country and a 5-star at that. But Drew, let's stay in the state of Florida. Brandon Ennis, another Ohio State commit, along with Mark Fletcher, both of those guys from American Heritage. You got to see them this weekend. Both of them committed to the Ohio State Buckeyes, but that's not preventing Mario Cristobal and the Miami Hurricanes from coming after him.
Yeah, I don't think Miami's going to let up here with Brandon Ennis or Mark Fletcher. Like I said with Carnell Tate, Tennessee's the team to watch if he were to open things back up or potentially look around. With Mark Fletcher and Brandon Ennis, I think Miami is the one that has the best chance out of anyone to flip them from Ohio State. Talking with some people close to Brandon Ennis, this is a kid that kind of grew up liking the Hurricanes. I don't want to say he's a fan or anything, but I think he's always had and been attracted to what is going on in Coral Gables. Miami, Mario Cristobal, Josh Gaddis, they're looking for a premier elite wide receiver. And from what I've heard, they're not going to slow down. I mean, they're going to keep trying to chip away at Hakeem Williams, who we'll get to here in a second. They also like Jurian Dickey, but the kid right in their backyard that they're after hard is Brandon Ennis. Now with Mark Fletcher, he's a guy that when he picked Ohio State back in April, Miami still wasn't kind of all in on him. I think that coaching staff was still figuring out their running back board. And that's one of the reasons why Mark Fletcher went ahead and picked the Buckeyes in Ohio State, because Ryan Danco wanted Mark Fletcher at the moment. Since then, Miami has kind of changed their tone on him. They moved him up the board. And I'll say this with Mark Fletcher, one thing you got to know is his dad is a big Miami fan. So we'll see if these lead to any visits. I know Mark Fletcher is going to be up in Columbus this weekend for that opener against Notre Dame. But Miami, they're not taking their foot off their pedal. And I think this could get interesting the closer we get to the early signing period, depending on what happens in year one for Mario Cristobal and what happens at Ohio State for Ryan Day here with all the expectations they have with C.J. Stroud under center.
Big weekend for Mark Fletcher and Brandon Inniss as Los Alamitos came to town. One of the top quarterbacks in the country, Malachi Nelson, Mekhi Lemon as well, a top 32 player. American Heritage, Los Alamitos, American Heritage wins that game 56-27. We're going to talk about that a little more here in a bit. But Drew, let's go and turn the page to a guy that you just brought up. That's top 247 receiver Hakeem Williams, an Oyster Boys favorite, a guy that we talk about week in and week out. You've talked about a decision potentially coming up here in September. What's the latest with Hakeem Williams?
Well, he's still going to announce a commitment. It's going to be September 23rd on CBS Sports HQ. And I think that's really going to be maybe the first commitment. You know, talking with different college contacts, communicating and trading messages with people close to Hakeem, it sounds like he will announce a college decision, but he's still going to take some visits. He's still got some stuff set up. He hasn't revealed where he's going to be, but the big news, I think, in this recruitment is this upcoming weekend, Hakeem Williams making his way out to New Orleans for that neutral site game between Florida State and LSU. You know, the Seminoles are going to have a few tickets they can hand out to recruits. They can't interact with the kids off campus, but Hakeem will be in the stands to watch that game. And I think if Florida State wins, that's going to help them in that recruitment. Texas A&M's the current crystal ball leader. I still like the Aggies, but I keep hearing a ton of FSU buzz behind the scenes, and I think the Seminoles have kind of closed that gap heading into these final few weeks before Hakeem announces a decision. Now, you know, we'll see who Hakeem picks, but like I said, that battle when we get to December or January is going to be just as intense. I don't think Georgia's going to go away there. I think Georgia's going to try to sell him on being the next George Pickens. Pittsburgh's very well in this thing. Hakeem's going to see them in 2 weeks. So we'll see. And then Mario Cristobal in Miami. I had someone really close to Hakeem tell me, hey, I just hung up the phone with Mario Cristobal. So that battle is tightening. Big news, though, is that Florida State seems to have some serious traction, footing, whatever you want to call it, as we are, a month out from his announcement on CBS Sports HQ.
Drew, how big does this game feel to you for Mike Norvell? We've talked about it all offseason, that it was going to come down really to set the tone for the season in a season where Mike Norvell is really pushing in all the chips right now. They win week 0 against Duquesne. I think everybody expected that. But now all the attention shifts to week 1 against LSU on Sunday night in the Caesars Superdome. If Florida State wins this game, what does it not only mean in the recruitment of a Hakeem Williams, but there's some other guys that we're going to talk about here shortly as well?
Well, they're in the standalone spotlight game. It's like you're playing Sunday night football or Monday night football. I mean, nothing else is going to be on Sunday of Labor Day weekend. If you watch football, you follow football, you're watching LSU and FSU. So this is the perfect stage for Mike Norvell, Alex Atkins, and that staff to make a statement. And you know, if they do win in New Orleans, you get on that plane and you're on the phone FaceTiming every top target you got. You're 2-0. That would be a great start for Florida State. So, you know, I think the stage and the avenue and the runway is there where Florida State, who has been a little more reserved this recruiting cycle, can start pounding their chest after beating an SEC opponent, you know, on the biggest stage with all the cameras on them. So this is a huge weekend for the Seminoles. They had some visitors this past weekend when they played an FCS opponent and moved to 1-0. But FSU, you know, if they are able to take down LSU, I think that's going to help them in a number of battles, not just the one with Hakeem Williams.
Seminoles sitting at number 22 in the 24/7 Sports Composite Team rankings. Drew, a couple other guys here for Florida State in the works that Florida State is working over hard right now. That's Penn State safety commit Conrad Hussey from St. Thomas Aquinas, the 4-star safety, and then 4-star defensive back Damari Brown that you got to see this weekend. Where do the Noles stand with those two?
I actually saw both those guys. Conrad played in a game earlier in the day before Los Alamitos and American Heritage went in there. I wouldn't be surprised if FSU got official visits from both of those guys, Conrad Hussey and Damari Brown. Conrad Hussey, he committed to Penn State back in April, but he told me that his recruitment isn't really shut down. He's still communicating with different coaches around the country, hasn't set up any official visits, but it's pretty notable that this summer he did make his way up to Tallahassee. It was supposed to be an under-the-radar type of unofficial visit, a little meet and greet. I think word leaked a little bit early. I don't know if Conrad was happy about that, but Florida State still very much in the mix. You remember the Seminoles signed Julian Armella, a lineman out of St. Thomas Aquinas last year. Conrad told me when he went up to Tallahassee, Julian Armella was telling him, hey, this is just the same thing. You're going to love it here. With Damari Brown, a lot of people think he is a Miami lean. Dad played for the Hurricanes. His brother is at UCF where he's playing early. But I think he's still kind of keeping everything open. I think there is a ton of internal, external pressure to end up in Coral Gables. But Alabama's a team he likes. And then Florida State, he keeps mentioning them. He's mentioned them to me multiple times throughout this recruitment. So we talk about that LSU game for Florida State. If they're able to win that, I think that gives them a ton of ammunition, helps them with those two defensive backs, and that's what Florida State needs. They did very well in the defensive backfield in the 2022 cycle. Damari Brown, Conrad Hussey, and they'd be pretty stacking elite defensive backs on elite defensive backs here in the 2023 cycle.
If you're Ryan Day and James Franklin, and you think about what we've talked about in the first segment in the show, I mean, we talked about 3 Ohio State commitments, and all 3 of them are from the state of Florida. And right now you got Tennessee knocking on the door, you got Miami knocking on the door, then you got Conrad Hussey with Florida State knocking on the door. He's committed to Penn State right now. It is very difficult for teams up north in the Big Ten, really out of the SEC footprint, to hold on to the finish line, even after doing a really great job proactively on the identification and evaluation part of the process. So we'll see on that, but I wonder, is that going to have future implications, or maybe these teams start to pivot in terms of the recruiting strategy and going down south to Florida? But Drew, I want to finish with a Big Ten school, and that's Michigan State, who seems like they are laying the groundwork for one of the top players in the 2024 class. That is edge TJ Capers.
Yeah, we'll call him a front 7 defender. You know, I was at his game on Friday night, Miami Columbus. St. Benedictine from Georgia made the drive down there, and he's a guy that plays linebacker. I think me and you project him to be more of a pass rusher. He's already 230 pounds, but the big news with him is I think Michigan State might be in the driver's seat right now. TJ made it up to East Lansing at the last week of July. He seemed to really, really enjoy it, and he told me he's planning to return to East Lansing the weekend of September 24th for an unofficial visit. I think Michigan State hosts Minnesota that weekend. So Mel Tucker and co. Getting in early on one of South Florida's top underclassmen. They look like they will be in it down the stretch. One other visit for TJ Capers. He told me he's got locked in. That's up this upcoming weekend. He's going to be in Gainesville for Florida's opener against Utah. Obviously, that's Billy Napier's first game. So TJ Capers, Michigan State, kind of remember those two being linked together, because I think we could be talking about that as we get into more and more of the 2024 cycle next year.
So there you have it from Andrew Ivins, the Juice, bringing the goods as always. Great job.
Was that good enough?
That was great, man. You had the Celsius. You were lagging a little bit before, so I had to pep you up a little bit, but you did a great job, buddy. Hey, let's now talk. You had a big weekend. We talked about you going to see 5 games. The one that I think everybody kind of had their eyes on was that American Heritage Los Alamitos game. Star-studded game. We've talked about Brandon Ennis. We've talked about Mark Fletcher. We kind of thought this game was going to be a really good measuring stick for one of the top quarterbacks in the country, and that's USC commit Malachi Nelson, Makai Lemon as well. The list goes on and on. But you kind of came into the game thinking, okay, Malachi Nelson, Brandon Ennis, those are going to be the 2 guys that I'm going to focus on. And Drew, you kind of came away. Mark Fletcher ran for over 200 yards. The Buckeyes commit. Another guy, Damari Brown, that we just talked about, had an INT and played well. And Makai Lemon was a guy that certainly made an impact on this game. I just want to get your impressions and your biggest takeaways from one of the biggest games this weekend.
Well, I think you can go in a ton of different directions here. But if we're talking big picture, 10,000-foot view, for me, you know, everyone talks about Ohio State's receivers, Carnell, Tate, Brandon Ennis, Bryson Rogers, Noah Rogers, and then he's got Jelani Thurman, all headed to Columbus. We keep talking about this passing attack, and Dylan Raiola is coming. To me, Mark Fletcher kind of waved his hand and said, hey, guys, you know, I'm a powerful running back that on a big stage can take over a game. He goes for over 200 yards, 2 touchdowns. I know he had the 73-yard run where he got caught from behind. I think he actually tweeted out that he cramped up. I mean, I don't care what it is. To me, I saw a Big Ten running back that other people didn't want to tackle. So I don't think we've talked enough about Mark Fletcher. He has dealt with some injuries. He's never tested anywhere. He's never camped anywhere. So I think some people like to have some concerns about his testing profile, the whole answers. But to me, from what I've seen, there are shades of Derrick Henry in his game, and I think he's a very solid addition for the Buckeyes in that recruiting class. He's a guy that on third down, if you need 3 yards, he's probably going to get you 4 or 5. And I think that's certainly notable in this era of football.
Tough assignment for Los Alamitos defense. He was a very tough ball carrier to bring down. But another guy kind of stole the show, even in the loss column, was Malachi Lemon. And Drew, I know there's been a lot of conversation back and forth. Is he going to be a receiver? Is he going to be a cornerback? He's currently a guy that we have listed as an athlete, but this is a guy that balled out, man. He went over 200 yards receiving. He had 17 receptions. He also had a 97-yard kickoff return touchdown and a 65-yard touchdown reception called back on penalties. So you think about the sum of what he could have put together that day on an already fabulous day. What'd you like about Malachi Lemon?
I'm going to be straight up honest. I've kind of questioned Malachi Lemon and where we've had him ranked. I've had some exposure points to him, saw him play 7-on-7 back at the Battle Miami tournament in January. Obviously saw him out at OT7, and there was never really one moment where I was like, wow, this is a dude. I'm changing my tone when it comes to Malachi Lemon after seeing him against American Heritage. You rattled off all the numbers. To me, he was just so consistent in his body control. I think one of his touchdown catches, it was of the back shoulder variety, where he finds a way to get his toe down and twist and get into the end zone. This is a baller. This is a dude. He also played some defensive back. And I am a fan of him. I think when we look, again, big picture, what does this mean for college football? You pair this guy with Zachariah Branch and Jacoby Lane, a big-bodied 4-star wide receiver with elite ball skills who USC just picked up a commitment from on Friday. Man, Lincoln Riley's offense looks pretty dang good for their future in the Big Ten, especially with Malachi Nelson there. So I'm a huge fan of Malachi Lemon. Stock up for me, and I was probably one of his biggest doubters in that 24/7 Sports Rankings Council.
So let's stay on USC. I think coming into the week, we wanted to know how Malachi Nelson was going to fare. One of the best quarterbacks in the country, committed to the Trojans in Lincoln Riley. You get to see him go up against a very good American Heritage team. He finishes the day 19 of 33, 213 yards, 4 touchdowns, and an INT. What'd you take away from his performance?
He throws a really pretty football, and mechanically, he's probably one of the best, if not the best, in the 2023 cycle. I want to ask you, because I think I've heard you say something similar along those lines. He faced some adversity. I mean, he was in an early deficit. He had to throw the football. American Heritage doesn't have the best of pass rushes, but they were getting some success. And what I liked about Malachi Nelson is he seemed very calm and collected in the pocket. I like his body movement and patterns. He's always keeping his eyes down the field. So, he didn't win. He threw an interception. But to me, I came away from it thinking this is a guy. This is someone that can throw the football, get it to his playmakers. And I was impressed with him. Nothing really changes. Maybe, again, I've kind of not been a doubter, but I've had some concerns and questions. But I think seeing him move around with the bullets flying, I was super impressed with just how he gets rid of the football and how he finds open windows and gets his players in position to make plays.
56-27, American Heritage wins that game against Los Alamitos. And you said it, I think Malachi Nelson, certainly a guy, I wouldn't say there are question marks. He is so God-given in terms of the natural arm talent. Sometimes he just looks casual back there in the pocket, and I think sometimes you can mistake that for lack of focus at times. But what we saw this weekend, to me, and I'm still finishing up the film in the fourth quarter, but certainly is what we've come to expect from Malachi Nelson, and a very good performance for him in terms of the stat line and the production as well. But Drew, let's jump out now to the West Coast, and one of our favorite players, Jurian Dickey, the 5-star Jurian Dickey, top 247 receiver in Oregon commit, one of the best players in the class. He transfers to Menlo Atherton, and they had a heck of a game, 48-34. They come back, they beat Bellarmine. But the stat line for Jurian Dickey, 6 touches, 160 yards, and I believe he finished with 4 touchdowns. He is a big physical player, and I'm watching that game, And it took probably midway through the first half until they started getting him consistent touches, and that's when it felt like the game turned. But he is a dynamic playmaker, and I think outside of Dante Moore, he's the crown jewel of that Oregon class, and I think a guy that could be a potential program changer for the Ducks.
Yeah, I was kind of going through some Twitter clips. That's what I like to do, is search a kid's name and boots on the ground angles from reporters that are there. And my takeaway was Jurian looked like the biggest player on the field, and that includes the offensive and the defensive linemen. And he took a quick slant and just turned on the afterburner and pulled away from everyone. He's a special talent. There is no question about that. He was also playing some wildcat quarterback, which I kind of love to see. And his ability to make people miss in that little phone booth and fight for extra yardage is super unique. Absolutely agree with you. That is the early gem of that Oregon recruiting class, and you pair him with Dante Moore, those guys should be able to make some big plays on big stages at some point down the line.
He's a dude, and I expect other teams to come knocking on Jurian Dickey. We've seen that. Miami's certainly a team. Georgia trying to get in the mix as well. So Dan Lanning is going to have his hands full, but he is worth it. And Jurian Dickey, if they can keep him in the boat. But Drew, a big upset down in Florida, and it was kind of one, I'm going through the Twitter timeline, not one that I really expected, but Miami Central goes to Bradenton, Florida, and they beat IMG Academy, stunned them 20-14. And we heard a lot of noise about Ruben Bain, top 247 defensive lineman. We even heard that from Danny Ramirez, who was fanboy in the recent movie Top Gun Maverick. Shout out to Danny Ramirez, but he thinks that Ruben Bain should get his 5th start. That's neither here nor there. I want to talk about the game a little bit, and then we'll get into Ruben Bain. But this is not what we expected. We talked about IMG having an SEC type of front seven, and really you talk about their 2 corners as well, Ricks and Ellis Robinson, and then you look at that score, and it's a little perplexing with Miami Central pulling off the upset.
Oh, I think good thing my local doesn't accept action on high school football, or it would have been a bad weekend for your boy. I was on the wrong side of some of these coming into it. But hats off to Miami Central, that coaching staff and their head coach. He brought it up, and I tweeted about this. These kids have been preparing for this moment their entire lives, from 7U in the park to now. And, they've been prepared to take down Goliath, and they were able to do it. IMG Academy actually lost their starting quarterback, Jaden Bradford, early on in the game. I believe he's got a separated shoulder, dislocated shoulder, did it on a little scramble. And I think that kind of opened the door for the Rockets to take control, and they did. Keon Jennings, FIU quarterback commit. I don't know, Cooper, if you've watched much of this game. He deserves a shout-out, 141 yards passing, 2 touchdowns. Did a great job of getting away from that IMG defensive line. But this is a huge win. Awesome to see. And Ruben Bain, let's talk about him. 3 sacks, 7 tackles for loss. Cooper, what did you think of his performance? Because I have some thoughts, but Ruben Bain, 29.5 sacks as a junior. This might have been his best game to date, at least from a statistical standpoint.
I'm about a half through right now. Right now, that the impact for Ruben Bain individually has been limited, but I think he did his job. I mean, it was more assignment football. But Francis Mauigoa, I don't want to turn the conversation off of Ruben Bain, but Francis Mauigoa continues to prove that he's arguably the best offensive lineman in all of high school football. But certainly, I think it was that second half where Ruben Bain made that impact. You talk about the 3.5 sacks, the TFLs as well. I mean, we know Ruben Bain and what he brings to the table. I think the biggest question with him in terms of projecting him to the next level is how much meat on the bone does he have left in terms of that athletic projection in upside, developmental upside, in terms of how much weight can he put on. But in terms of what he is right now, I think Ruben Bain has proved time and time again that he's one of the most impactful players in this cycle.
Well, I'm on the same boat as you, because I'm about in order. And, you get all these tweets about how we need to make this kid a 5-star. And don't get me wrong, I love Ruben Bain. I know you love Ruben Bain, but I thought I was going to put on the tape and, this guy was just having his way. And then all I see is Francis Mauigoa kind of holding his own. And I think they kind of started moving Ruben to the other side, going up against Jimothy Lewis, who's a very talented 2024 offensive tackle. And this is no discredit to him. I mean, that IMG starting 5 is the best you're going to find in the country. But I think, we're kind of like living on a few plays here. I mean, don't get me wrong, he's talented, but it wasn't some dominating performance against Malagoa. I thought Malagoa was excellent in that game.
The tail is in the tape. Typically, that's what they say. A lot of stat boys out there, but that's all right. That's our job to watch the tape, and that's what we do, to refuse that, or maybe just get to the bottom of what is what. But Drew, you had a little bit of a football crush. There was a guy out there, 2024 FSU commit at the quarterback position that you told me a while back. You said, hey, we got to keep an eye on this guy. You got to see him this past weekend. They came up short on the road, but that's Luke Kromenhoek, and a guy that you continue to come away impressed with. What'd you like about him this weekend?
So, Luke, this is the third time I've seen him throw. I saw him throw at a camp, Under Armour camp. Then I saw him at FSU Seminole Showcase, and then I circled this game on my calendar, Savannah Benedictine. They came down to Miami to play Miami Columbus, and I needed to see Luke primarily because this was his only second start as a quarterback ever. This is a kid who last year backed up Holden Gerner, who signed with Auburn, was an Elite 11 finalist. Luke was playing safety and wide receiver for his team. He waited his turn, and I think he was awesome. Yeah, his team lost. They were a bit overwhelmed at the point of attack. Luke was running for his life. But to me, what I saw is a guy with a quick release, does an excellent job of getting outside the pocket, keeping plays alive. And he's very, very athletic and hard to get to the ground. There's a few clips I posted on my Instagram where he's getting out of tackles. Someone tries to hit him late out of bounds. That guy bounces off of him. But we've wondered, what is Florida State doing at quarterback? I think the answer is they really, really like the guy they have committed in the class of 2024. And we have a mid 3-star grade on him. I mean, I remember when I had to grade him, I was so pissed off because there's not much tape to grade on him. And I think he's a guy that's going to climb in our rankings. And I had a hunch that he was the real deal when he started getting some offers back in June. I know he threw for Billy Napier and the Gators, left Gainesville with an offer, but stock up, red arrow for me on Luke Kromenhoek.
Yeah, he made some impressive throws. I know the clip that I sent you before the show, him rolling out, throwing a dot about 50 yards across his body, takes the hit, touchdown in the first half of that game. So he's done some impressive things, I think, physically as well. There's a lot of upside to work with. So if you're Florida State, credit to those guys on the early ID there. And Luke Kromenhoek, it looks like that one's going to pan out. We'll keep an eye on him. But Drew, a couple other games on the West Coast we're not going to be able to dive into, but they definitely should serve notice. I mean, you look at this Bishop Gorman Mater Dei game, and this is one we kind of had circled. That one, 24-21, Mater Dei comes back. We'll get into that hopefully on Wednesday a little bit more, but that was a physical game. I'm about 3/4 through that one. I'm all over the place right now trying to watch as many games as possible. St. John Bosco and St. John Bosco and Allen, Texas. I mean, you got that one circled, and that is 52-14. St. John Bosco wins that game in Allen, Texas. I mean, West Coast football, we talk about it a lot. Give those guys a lot of credit. Bishop Gorman in Las Vegas. Obviously, you got Mater Dei in Santa Ana. You got St. John Bosco right there as well. So they're flexing right there against some of the better teams in the country. But Drew, let's move on to Oklahoma. We wanted to talk about Oklahoma a little bit, but before we do that, I want to make sure you at home, if you haven't done so already, make sure you subscribe to the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel, not page. Throw a like, subscribe. That always helps us. Make sure you like the show. That certainly benefits us. Leave a comment, ask a question, any of that. Drew and I will make sure we get back to you. But Drew, let's pick up where we left off. Oklahoma, they are hot right now. I put out one of those Zoolander tweets the other day. Oklahoma, so hot right now. And they're the number 4 team in the 24/7 composite team rankings, and they're just getting it done. They start the week off, or weekend off, I should say, getting a commitment from 3-star receiver Anthony Evans, the speedster, out of Texas, and a guy that a lot of people thought were going to Georgia, thought he was going to go play for Brian McClendon. He ends up taking his talents to Norman. He's going to play with Jeff Levy and Brent Venables. And then what we thought, they go into Florida and they get top 247 safety Makari Vickers, who we like a lot. So, Drew, there's so much to talk about going through Oklahoma and their commit list and what they've done so far. But to me, out of all the first-year head coaches, and Marcus Freeman, I'm going to take him out of it because he's done a tremendous job. But Brent Venables has been the most impressive. And to me, it's been a little bit of a surprise, I got to say.
I agree with you. The Caden Green one is the commitment that sticks out to me because I remember waking up Friday, the crystal ball was painted Georgia. I think Saturday, because I'm out on a field, you're tracking so many different things. I wake up and I check the recent commits, and the kid picked Oklahoma. I thought someone had made a mistake in the database or something like that, but sure enough, Brent Venables and that staff, they're able to get the job done in terms of getting him in the boat. And I don't know if you want me to pivot into this Caleb Spencer take I got, but I'm ready to fire on it if you are, and just what he means for Oklahoma's class.
Well, let's give it some pretext a little bit, because I was reading your article from this weekend and I saw that name Isaiah Simmons get thrown around, and I said, hey, what in the heck is going on here? But you're talking about, hey, Brent Venables might have the next Isaiah Simmons and Caleb Spencer. Drew, talk to the people. Explain why.
Yeah. I mean, so Life Christian Academy, they come down to Fort Lauderdale. It's a team out of Virginia. I didn't know anything about most of their guys, really. I mean, you watch their tape, but you don't dive into it with them being outside of my region. But Caleb Spencer is a guy that took over the game. Was doing everything on defense, lined up all over the spot, safety, linebacker, pass rusher by the time the game ended. Highlight of the day might have been when he turned around to the media gathered in the end zone and said, I'm going to block this extra point. Get out your camera and record it. Sure enough, he lunged over two defenders and blocked the extra point. I thought that was pretty notable. But I liked him. I started talking to him after the game. Hey, you're committed to Oklahoma. You know what? You're from the D.C. area. What's up with that? And he said that Brent Venables has told him he could be the next Isaiah Simmons, be a guy that is a chess piece on defense that is moved around. And I'm like, man, that kind of makes some sense. They're recruiting him for that cheetah position, which is as exotic as it sounds for the Sooners. So he's a guy that's going to move around for them. And my big thing with him is if Caleb Spencer, who I think in the composite rankings is Oklahoma's second lowest commit in the class of 2023, watch out for Oklahoma at some point down the line, because I think he's a guy that's going to be able to make an impact in the SEC one day. So nice find for the Sooners, and I'm a big fan of Caleb Spencer, and we'll see where he finishes in the rankings. I mean, he's a guy we had graded out as a safety. We moved him to the linebacker. He's moved up again. We'll see how the next few months go, but another guy that's a stock up one for me.
We'll have an update in the 2023 rankings the second week of October, so Caleb Spencer, definitely a guy to keep an eye on. But Jackson Arnold, the crown jewel of their class, and somebody that they identified early. We've always kind of had pretty high, but he took that jump after the Elite 11's MVP, showing that he has now carried on that production that he had and the momentum that he built over the offseason. Just looking at him, week one, they get the win over Rockwall Heath, 47-14, but he had over 200 yards passing. He had a couple touchdowns through the air, one on the ground, 87 yards rushing. To me, he is like the complete player and exactly what you want in Jeff Lebby's offense. Drew, just kind of looking what they have in that quarterback room right now. Obviously, you got the transfer, Dylan Gabriel, Nick Evers, a top 247 quarterback last year in the 2022 cycle. But I think Jackson Arnold has it to him. Whatever that word it is, I think he's got it. And I think he's going to be a guy that's going to be in the mix day one in Norman.
Oh, it's shaping up for the perfect situation with Nick Evers. I was a big Nick Evers guy last cycle. I think the thing for me with this Oklahoma group is what happens with Jeff Lebby. We haven't even started really playing games. We got through week 0, but Lebby's already getting linked to potential openings around the country and whatnot. So I'm not saying he's the glue guy for this offensive group, but I think it'll be interesting to track what happens once we get closer. You know, does Lebby go somewhere? He potentially try to get Jackson Arnold to follow him, and that doesn't always happen, but it could. But I do agree. I mean, both sides of the ball. We haven't even really got into all of Oklahoma's class, but there's a lot of pieces to like.
Well, let's get into it a little bit. And listen, we've talked a lot about Oklahoma, but another guy I wanted to highlight is PJ Adebawore. And we saw his brother, who was on Bruce Feldman's Freaks list, was so impactful this weekend in Nebraska Northwestern. His brother, Tommy, a defensive lineman at Northwestern, very similar in terms of the athletic makeup and obviously some strong genes there in that family. Jaquez Petaway, another guy that we like, a top 247 receiver. Caden Green was one of the best offensive linemen in Bradenton at the Future 50. We talked a little bit about Makari Vickers. We haven't even talked about Jacoby Johnson, Derek LeBlanc, who I think is a really good fit, Samuel Amosago, Colton Vasic, who is probably going to end up a top 247 guy, and Lewis Carter, Josiah Wagner, Dalen Smothers. The list goes on and on. I mean, they are deep, and I love this class. I go all the way through it. There's only a handful of classes like this in this cycle that I go through top to bottom, and I really love what they've done. To me, And I say it as a surprise, and it's not disrespect, but they are ready for the SEC. And I think Texas is getting there as well. But I like Oklahoma's class more than Texas. I think they're better top to bottom. I know Texas is higher ranked right now, but in terms of getting ready for that transition to the SEC, you got 10 guys in the top 247 in the 2023 cycle for Brent Venables. And this is year one without playing a game. Hey, if I'm an Oklahoma fan right now, I'm elated that Brent Venables is my head coach, and I love what he's putting together.
Hey, and Conrad Hussey, who I talked about in the Juice, that's another guy that Oklahoma's having some dialogue with and could potentially visit down the line. I think when I look at the commit list, it's just very national. You know, they got 6 kids from Texas, 4 kids from Florida, and then after that, you're in North Carolina. You're all over the place, and that's what you got to do if you're at Oklahoma. So you're right. The future looks bright, and with them headed to the SEC, this is why you move to the SEC. It expands your brand. As much of a national name that Oklahoma is, when you're going to play in that conference, it's going to open some more doors, and I think we're seeing it a little ahead of schedule here with the 2023 group for the Sooners.
Here's the stat for you, Drew. As of right now, I believe there are 206 players out of the 247 in the top 247 that are committed. 80 of them are committed to SEC schools. The second highest conference after that is the ACC with 29. The Big 12, Oklahoma, and Texas combined for 19. So that would almost be 100 out of the top 247 players, and you still got some meat left on the bone with about 41 guys that need to commit, and a lot of those guys are leaning to SEC schools. So all the talent, we talk about super conferences, it certainly looks like the SEC is not lacking there. But Drew, let's finish it off, 2-minute drill, and let's talk about the elephant in the room, right? We all saw it this weekend. I think week 0, the matchup that everybody kind of circled on there was Nebraska-Northwestern. We came on the show a week ago, and we said this was a must-win game for Nebraska, and it turns out it was. And they didn't get it done, but I think they lost, 7 games or 8 games last season in 2021 by a total of 7 points or less. Unfortunately, same song this year. Week 0, they lose to Northwestern. Tough game. I think both teams gave each other plenty enough opportunities to win that game. It's Northwestern at the end of the day. So, Drew, I know there's been a lot of soapbox about Scott Frost, what his future looks like. Is it murky? Is he going to get out of this season? But, you know, where are you at with Nebraska, and how do you kind of see this unfolding in Lincoln?
Well, I can't believe you took Nebraska in the points. I remember you did that last show.
I took Northwestern. That's Twitter documented, by the way. Go ahead.
Brandon Marcello, he outlines this perfect on 247sports.com, one of the national writers. Scott Frost's buyout drops to a much easier, much more reasonable number on October 1st. And it's hard at this point to see him lasting that long. And that got me thinking, where does Nebraska go from here? What do they try to do? And to me, I think they need to get a coach that can get more with less. And what do I mean by that? Someone that isn't going to get isn't reliant on a top 10 or a top 5 recruiting class, but can take a top 25, take a top 20 group, and turn it into a 10-win team. And it's 2 names I got written down here. The first one, Nebraska fans are going to roll their eyes at, but what about Dan Mullen, who was at Florida? What he did at Mississippi State. I think what's attractive about Dan Mullen is he's not coaching anywhere right now. Yeah, he's going to do some stuff on TV. He's an OC at somewhere, or a quality control analyst at a high school outside of Atlanta. But I go to what Texas Tech did with Joey McGuire. They hired him last November. He was able to get in and recruit, and that set the foundation for this excellent 2023 group. So I think Dan Mullen's one. And then the other one, Cooper, I want to hear your thoughts on. What about Matt Campbell out of Iowa State? He's been linked to so many different jobs, right? And I think if he was going to maybe not move laterally, but Nebraska in the Big Ten, Iowa State in the Big 12, I think Matt Campbell's a name that would make a ton of sense. And he's a guy that develops players, develops prospects, and gets more out of less. And I think that's what Nebraska is going to need. Some guy that's going to get more out of less.
He's a fit for sure. When you think about Matt Campbell, that was the one name that I had, and while we were talking, another one kind of popped into my head. But right now, Matt Campbell would kind of be the guy that I think fits Nebraska to a T, very similar to the Iowa State program. And I think Matt Campbell is a guy that is well positioned to coach. His style really fits the Big Ten Conference. You talk about regionally what fits his background. I think it fits Nebraska well. Blue-collar program would be able to develop. I think he would have to lean a little bit more on the transfer portal than he's done at Iowa State, but that's a name certainly that pops up. And I think if I'm Nebraska, that would be the one name that I'm circling that, hey, we got to go get that guy. Another guy, Drew, that I'll give you, Jonathan Smith at Oregon State. I think he's done a tremendous job there. He used to be the offensive coordinator under Chris Peterson at the University of Washington. He's kind of pieced it together at Oregon State. Now they've become a more competitive and stable program under his leadership. I think that makes sense. I don't know if Nebraska is going to go back to Oregon State to find their head coach, but just another name. I know we're early. We're only in week 1 right now. We've only played week 0, but those certainly 3 names. The Dan Mullen one, I tell you what, Drew, I think that's pretty creative, and it might sound out there, but I get the logic behind it as well. But Drew, I know you wanted to bring attention to another a noteworthy piece of news that came up this week as well, but that's UAB transfer. It looks like Miami's going to add a walk-on at the running back position in Lucius Stanley, a guy that played 5 years at UAB, will walk on at the University of Miami. And this is important because now all of a sudden Miami's depth is kind of taking a hit at that running back position. Don Chaney Jr., a little bit banged up. Trevante Citizen, a highly touted freshman, him as well. Looks like he's going to be on the shelf for a little bit too. Okay,
you got to stay with me here. But the big thing is, are we at free agency? Is free agency here now in this era with the transfer portal and NIL and all that stuff? Lucius Stanley, he went through camp at Tuskegee. He went through fall camp there, was going to play for them for a final season. Well, Miami needs some depth at running back due to injury. And Lucius, who's from the North Fort Myers, from the area, still has some time left, started 1 game for UAB last year. He's going to walk on at Miami. I think there's some talk of maybe him potentially getting a waiver for a scholarship, but it sounds like he's going to be there on his own dime, and I'm sure there's going to be maybe some NIL opportunities. But Miami, at the buzzer, is able to get a veteran body into camp, and I'm wondering if this is the tip of the iceberg and we're going to start to see more of this. So that's the big thing here. I just thought it was certainly notable. First I can recall of this happening. I mean, games are going to be played 5-6 days from now, and this kid who went through a fall camp at a different school is now added to the roster. So certainly interesting.
Never a dull moment in college football. Never a dull moment in Coral Gables with Mario Cristobal at the helm. So there you have it, UAB transfer, Tuskegee transfer, now at Miami. Drew, I'm going to give some love to UConn. I watched this game on Saturday, and I kind of had this one circled a little bit for betting purposes, I got to be honest. But UConn came into this game a 26.5 point underdog to Utah State and Blake Anderson's team. And you got to give a lot of credit to UConn the way they played. They lose this game 31-20. Their starting quarterback, Taquan Roberson, goes down early in this game. The Penn State quarterback transfer. They have to turn to the young freshman, Zion Turner. We heard a lot of buzz out of St. Thomas Aquinas. He comes in. He drew, as much as we like him and the potential of Zion Turner, it seemed like that game was a little bit too big for him in that moment, and understandably so. But Nathan Carter, the running back, the sophomore, 20 carries, 190 yards, 9.5 yards per touch. Another guy on the defensive side of the ball, Jackson Mitchell, was all over the place. If you watch that game, 7 tackles, 9 assisted as well. And you look at UConn and what they did. They had 234 total yards of total offense in the first half. They averaged 260 yards of total offense per game in 2021. A 1-11 team a year ago. UConn, a team that has been in such a state of instability. And for Jim Moore Jr., a guy that hasn't coached since his days back at UCLA in 2017, this was one that I thought was maybe a little bit of an odd hire, not what we expected, but the rare one that I thought was kind of a win-win. And I thought it kind of fit Jim Moore Jr. where he was in his career in UConn already. Those guys battled for 4 quarters. And if they can be competitive this year, I think that's going to be good enough for the UConn faithful who just want to see a competitive team.
Zion Turner, man, I fully anticipate him being the guy for UConn over the next few years if he's not poached to go somewhere else. I'll never forget, Power 5 assistant told me Zion Turner has done nothing but solve problems here for 3 years at St. Thomas Aquinas. He's going to do the same thing at the next level. So it was actually pretty cool that he was in the game, because I was standing right next to Roger Harriet, the STA coach. He had no idea that Zion was playing. He had no idea that he threw a touchdown pass, but it was cool to share that moment with him. A kid that was very easy to root for on the 7-on-7 camp circuit. So glad he got to get in there, and that's Jim Mora's quarterback of the future.
Is Jim Mora Jr. a low-key Oyster Boys head coaching candidate? We'll see. Week 4, we'll wait and see there. But, Drew, the last thing, 2-minute drill, you wanted to hit on this guy. You want to make sure you stamp this guy, because I think this is probably a guy we're going to come back a year or two from now and say, hey, we're really glad we took 30 seconds out of our show to say how much we like this player. And you talked a little bit about him before earlier in the show, but that's 4-star receiver and new USC commit Jacoby Lane.
Yeah, I touched on him. I think you're pairing him with Zachariah Branch, Makai Lemon, with Malachi Nelson. I mean, we talk so much about Ohio State's the weapons they have, the receivers they have coming in. I think watch out for Jacoby Lane. This is a guy that we've seen on camps. Excellent at getting the ball up in the air. I think he's got to figure some stuff out in between the ears and get motivated and avoid setbacks. But, man, I can see him going to USC and being a 1,000-yard receiver. So this is a pickup that flew under the radar. Kids, don't commit at 4 p.m. on a Friday. Most people are already checked out, but it will be one we're going to be talking about a lot, I think, come December during that early signing period.
Well, Drew, we're about 15 minutes over our runtime, but that's what happened. Producer Jesse, he's away. He goes to a wedding. So for us, we're going to talk as long as we want, but we're at 2:45 right now. We appreciate you guys as always. And make sure, I'm going to remind you one last time, make sure you subscribe, like, comment to the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. A lot going on right now. Keep it locked here for everything recruiting. I know right now everybody's attention is on college football, and rightfully so, but we will have you locked in all the way to December and then to the second signing period as well. So for Andrew Ivins, I'm Cooper Petagna, and we will see you back here 3 o'clock Eastern on Wednesday.